Hello everyone and welcome to another video of the Sky channel. So a lot of people asked me, what are the best artifacts for each of the classes? And honestly, artifacts have been getting more and more tricky to understand, especially as the more recent ones are extremely complex, right? So the initial ones were pretty simple, like this hammer. You can see a very simple, straightforward text. But as you keep going forward, you can see that there's just so many different things being added and so many lines of text that it becomes quite difficult to understand which one is really good. And to be honest, unless you really try them all out, you won't really know practically whether it's a really good one or not. Me, myself, I'm going to give you the theoretical, what should be good for the build and what shouldn't be. And what's going to happen is that there will be people in the comment section, hopefully, who can actually let me know if that's not right and that's the artifact is better or worse than what I'm saying. So feel free, if you think that there's something I'm saying is disagreeable, just leave it in the comment if you tried it out and you're like, no, practically it's different. Right. So we have that sense of, you could say, protection, that there might be people who watch this video who've tried this artifact out and they can be like, yeah, that's not true. So that's something that I just wanted to put there, right? Feel free to jump in. So what we are going to do is we're going to go through these artifacts and we're going to try to figure out which ones are the best for each of the classes. And of course, there are some that I absolutely know are really good because I know so many people have tried them and they've told me that's really good. So of course, we'll cover that as well. Let's start with the original artifacts, the one that is very simple to understand and very easy to understand. The hammer, which is still available and you can actually get it to the lottery event. It's pretty straightforward, right? The passive effect gives a 10% global basic attack damage, making it fairly useful for primarily, I guess, archers, but also can help with your warriors to some extent. But as you can see in the equipped skill, basic attacks and combos deal an additional 30% area effect damage, right? This makes it quite helpful primarily for archers because it's talking about combos and basic attacks, and archers are pretty good at that and they actually do a lot of basic attacks and combos. So of course, this is heavily focusing towards your archers now, and the global basic attack damage just makes it even more helpful. Now, one thing you do want to note is that this passive effect, the moment you unlock it, it's always going to be applying. This one, the one that's the equipped skill, it has to be equipped for it to apply. Right? So you want to get as many passive effects as you want. So that shouldn't be one of the things that you're considering when you're deciding which one to actually equip. But of course, you should consider that if you're thinking of unlocking it, because unlocking it is going to give you this on a permanent basis. So overall, it's good for archers. I won't say it's the best, right? There are better ones out there that you could be using that can help you a lot more. Now, the next one's coming in is the Eye of Raven. And actually, this should probably have been one of the last ones that I show, but I'm going in order. So we'll talk about this one now. Global HP is the artifact's passive effect, right? Which is nice. You want to have as much of these global stats as possible. But if you look at the equipped skill, casts an equipped active skill at random every 20 seconds. And then the first one comes in 2 seconds after battle starts. Now, this may not seem too cool or fancy when you just look at it like that, but I will tell you something. This is by far the best artifact out there. And the reason is because it gives you the ability to do the double clone strike. And that is absolutely amazing, right? You have 2 clones doing a bunch of basic attack damage. And not just that, they're also protecting you because they do have a certain amount of health as well, making it extremely overpowered, right? If you are doing some PvP and you notice the enemy has 2 clones that are coming up in front of you, there's a pretty good chance they're probably going to win that PvP, unless of course there's a huge power difference. And you can actually check this out. There's the artifact preview, and what we're going to do is we are going to do the artifact preview, and I want to show you when we get 2 clone strikes and how cool that is. So let's do that now. And there you go, first time. And you can see, yeah, you saw those 2 clones. And of course, that is absolutely crazy. I was actually thinking I'll probably have to do this several times and then edit out the parts where it didn't happen, but I got extremely lucky and got it in the first time. Anyway, let's go to the next one. So this Candy Gatling, basic attacks, combos, and counters unleash an additional 1 to 5 bullets, and each bullet deals 10% of current basic attack damage, which doesn't trigger the windborne arrow. But essentially, now it's not just basic attacks and combos, they also added counters because they want to cater to not just archers, but also the warriors. So every time you do any of these, there's a chance to do 10 to 50% of your current basic attack damage as an extra. In the passive effect, you get 10% global attack, which is of course also helpful. So it's reasonable. If you're an archer, for example, you're going to do a lot of basic attacks and a lot of combos, and this is adding about 10 to 50% extra basic attack damage to each of those combos, so this could potentially be fairly helpful. But we still have a lot of other artifacts to cover, so let's go to the next one, the Skyward Blade. Global attack, always helpful. And then for every 10 either basic attacks, combos, counters, or skills, now they're adding skills as well, because now this is going to cater to all of the classes. Release a sword aura dealing 150% of your current basic attack damage, which essentially means that for every basic attack or combo or counter or skill, it's adding a 15% basic attack damage to it, right? If you just break it down, 15% per basic attacks, combos, counters, and skills. Now, what I feel like doing is I just want to quickly go to the previous one that adds about 10 to 50% on each of these, minus, of course, the skills. This is adding a 15%. This makes the Candy Gatling a little better in my opinion. Its average damage would probably be a little higher because I don't know if you're going to release skills very, very often compared to basic attacks and combos and counters. So the sword seems to lack a little bit from that regard. But of course, if you are able to get it, the 10% global attack is definitely going to help you. So it's not something that I'd be like, don't get it altogether. It really depends on if you are the sort of person who gets everything, or if you are the sort of person who wants to prioritize getting just the ones that are the best fit for your build. So the next one is called the Tear Attack. This one gives a global attack, which is definitely helpful as well. And what it does is that it summons one of those frogs with 20% of your health every 12 seconds. And upon its death, or 4 seconds after it's summoned, it will explode, dealing 1000% of your basic attack damage. So this can be fairly helpful, right? It triggers in the start of the battle as well. So the moment it triggers, it releases one of the frogs and then it actually takes in some damage and then it explodes, dealing 1000% damage. In a way, you can think of it as every 12 seconds, it's doing 1000% damage, which can be helpful, and it could potentially also tank a bunch of hits. So it is something that I have seen a bunch of people using. As you can imagine, it would be more useful for classes that have a very high basic attack damage as opposed to, let's say, mages who probably do not prioritize increasing their global basic attack damage. So that's something that comes to my mind when I read this. Next up, the Double-Edged String, another global attack of 10%, which is always helpful. And its equip skill, after the battle starts, enhances the next basic attack every second. Right, so one basic attack every second is going to have this ability. Basic attack deals 100% more basic attack area effect damage. So you're doing basic attacks, and then every second you'll also do an extra 100% basic attack damage, but that's going to be an area effect damage, so not just a single target. But that's not it. So there are certain requirements, and if you meet the requirement for the first time, right, so it's not like every time you meet the requirement, you're going to get this effect, but for the first time you meet that requirement, these special basic attack area effect damages that it releases will actually get a little bit extra enhancements. So the first one says that after 25 combos, the enhanced basic attacks deal an extra 150% current combo area effect damage. So once you've done 25 combos, the enhanced basic attack will actually deal even more damage than we were talking about before. It'll deal an additional 150% current combo damage as an area effect. The next one is, of course, focusing on the warrior class. So after 25 counter strikes, the enhanced basic attacks will deal 150% counter damage as area effect. And of course, what's missing was a target for the mages. And after 10 skills, the enhanced basic attacks will deal 400% area effect skill damage. So targeting basically all of the classes. However, you could get all three. So it's not like it has to be one or the other. The moment you've done 25 combos, the next one is going to have the extra 150% combo area effect damage. Then you might have done 25 counters after that, and then you get the 150% counter area effect damage. And then after releasing 10 skills, you get this 400% area effect skill damage. That being said, it only happens the first time, and after that, it goes back to the normal 100% extra basic attack area effect damage. So ignoring those once in a battle effects, what we're looking at here is 100% extra basic attack area damage every second. And if you compare it with this was every 12 seconds, 1000% basic attack damage, but not area effect. Now, if I were to compare these two, I'd probably say this one comes a little bit on top when it comes to damage, because 12 seconds, 1000% versus every 1 second area effect basic attack damage probably seems to be a little bit better. That being said, it can't be completely compared because this also gives you a little bit of extra tankiness because, well, it does have 20% of your maximum HP and that could potentially save you some damage. So it does go down to a little bit of a situational thing. And of course, area effect damage is more useful in PvE than in PvP, because in PvE you have multiple enemies coming at you, so area effect is helpful. In PvP, I guess, unless the enemy is using Clone Strike, it's a 1v1. Next up, there's the Extreme Caution, which is basically the scissor that just released not too long ago, and it's giving a 5% global combo damage, which is interesting to see, as before we were just looking at global attacks and stuff. Now this is a 5% global combo. And if you look at the equipped skill, every basic attack has a 50% chance to deal an extra damage equal to 0.5% of the target's maximum HP, and a 10% chance to wound the target, reducing their regeneration and healing by 90% for 1 second. So every single basic attack has a 50% chance to deal extra damage equal to 0.5% of the target's maximum HP. And that's maximum HP, not current HP. So for me personally, I see this as a really, really nice skill, because technically speaking, every basic attack is doing approximately 0.25% of the target's maximum HP as an extra damage, because it's 0.5% but 50% chance. So if you just do it on a per basic attack, it comes out to be approximately 0.25% of the target's maximum HP getting taken away as an additional damage, right? Which is pretty cool. And then it also reduces regeneration and healing by 90% for 1 second. But of course, there's a 10% chance of that. But either way, it can really be impactful if you're fighting some really strong warriors that have a lot of regeneration and a lot of health. You can rely on a percentage maximum damage being added. And as you can imagine, if it's global combo damage, you do know that they are targeting archers. And then the more basic attacks, the better, right? Which again is also seems like an archer thing. So I'd say this is a good artifact to have if you're an archer, something that I would probably want to test myself as well. And if you have tested it, please let me know. But in my opinion, this seems like a pretty good thing to have as an archer, especially if you're facing a very tanky foe that has a bunch of healing and a very high health. Next up, the Spring Cord, and every 11 seconds it deals 1000% of your current basic attack damage as an area effect damage, and then it confuses targets. So each of their own attacks will deal an extra 20% of their current basic attack damage to themselves. And the confusion lasts 5 seconds. So again, I want to go back to compare with this one again. This one is doing 1000% basic attack damage as well. To a single target, this is doing 1000% basic attack area effect damage, so to multiple targets, which is pretty cool. This gives a 20% maximum health, which you're not getting here, but it's also confusing the target, so the enemy actually ends up doing some damage to themselves based on the amount of basic attack damage that they have. So the higher the enemy's basic attack damage, the more damage they'll be doing to themselves. So I can see certain situations where this can be particularly helpful, like if you are fighting an archer with a very high basic attack damage, the confusion that you do to them could actually hurt them quite a bit as well. If we talk about the passive effects, we're talking about a 10% global attack. And of course, the first part of the skill was basically 1000% of your current basic attack area effect damage, which of course would be more helpful if you are somebody with a lot of basic attack damage. But that's pretty much consistent. A lot of the previous ones have to do with basic attack damage as well. So it seems like artifacts seem to really focus on your basic attack damage. Next up, we have the Siren's Whisper. Passive effect, global attack. And what it does is it summons a beast with control immunity and 16% of your maximum health every 14 seconds. And it lasts 5 seconds. Now the beast actually does 40% of your damage while it is summoned. So at first glance, this seems like another one of those clone strikes, right? You get an extra 16% of your maximum HP. That being said, the 40% damage is fairly less compared to how much your actual clone strike does, right? I think that's 200% or maybe even higher. So it's definitely not as impactful as clone strike. And it does it every 14 seconds, which means if you were to compare it to this is every 12 seconds and it's 20% of your maximum health, and it does a decent amount of basic attack damage to the enemy. This one summons less frequently, has less health, and does 40% of your damage during the 5 seconds that it lasts. So it seems like it's probably not extremely powerful. Like, it definitely seems cool, but I don't know if this is actually something that will deal a lot of damage to the enemy. So I don't see it as a very, very nice artifact. And I haven't seen people using it too often, so my assumption is it's probably not one of the top ones out there, which is why the people in my server haven't been using it. If you disagree, of course, and if you've tried it and it does seem to be fairly helpful, do let us know in the comments below. Next one, the Web Chainsaw, which gives you a 10% global attack, and then each basic attack has a 15% chance to apply a stack of tear, and it deals 20% basic attack damage per second to the target, and it could get critical damage as well, and reduces their defense by 6% until the battle ends, stacking up to 5 times. So we're looking at about 34 basic attacks needed for you to get the 5 stacks in total. And once you do that, you're going to have 100% basic attack damage per second to the target. And if you have a high crit damage, you could get crit on that as well. And then you'll be reducing the enemy's defense by 30%. And this will last until the end of battle. And of course, once you do stack it 5 times, it deals damage equal to 8% of their maximum HP once, and increases the damage they receive by 6% until the battle ends. So the way I read this seemed to be a pretty nice artifact. Sure, it does take about 6 to 7 basic attacks to get a stack in. Of course, about 34 before you get all 5 in, but it does last until the end of battle, and it just keeps on adding damage to the enemy, reducing their defense and increasing their damage that you deal to them all the way until the end of battle. So if you're an archer with a high attack speed and you do a lot of basic attacks, I can see how this can be particularly helpful, and the way I read it, it probably is a really nice artifact to use if you're an archer. Alright, the Flaming Carnage, another one of those global attack passives, and then every crit has a chance to deal area effect bleed damage equal to 50% of your basic attack, ignoring the damage immunity that the enemy has, and then reducing the target's critical resistance by 1% and stacking up to 20 times. So this is pretty much all about criticals, right? The more you crit, it adds a little bit of an extra damage to the enemy, 50% of your basic attack, and then you can potentially reduce the enemy's crit resistance by 20%, which can also be fairly helpful. But the way I read this artifact, it probably isn't one of the top ones out there. No doubt, it does seem to have a little bit of an extra benefit, right? If you do a lot of crits, you have a chance to deal the 50% basic attack damage. It doesn't actually tell what's the chance. Is it 100%? Is it a 50% chance? But anyhow, there's a chance to do an extra damage. You can ignore damage immunity and reduce the enemy's crit resistance, so your future criticals are even stronger. But I'd say that it probably isn't one of the best artifacts out there based on just the way I read the equipped skills. Finally, this is the last one that's currently available, the Eternal Flame. And it gives a 10% global attack, and we were seeing this in the beginning of the video as well. There's a lot of text to this, so let's try to get through that. When the battle starts, you get an invincible torchbearer, immune to all damage, and what that basically means is that it's also not really helping you tank anything because it's immune to all damage, so the enemy is just going to come straight at you and start attacking you. It exists for 2 seconds, and then after it disappears, you get a 5% final critical damage, 5% final skill critical damage and a 5% final PAL critical damage until the battle ends. So it's a permanent bonus that you're getting. So this one you get immediately when the battle starts, but you have to wait 2 seconds to get it. And after those 2 seconds, you get a 5% increase in your criticals, right? And that includes critical damage and skill critical and then PAL critical as well. Fairly helpful, right? There's not a lot of sources of getting final or global critical damage, and this is giving 5%, which is quite helpful in my opinion. And then you go to the next one, 8 seconds after battle, or you can just say 10 seconds because it exists for 2 seconds either way. So basically after 10 seconds, you get a 5% extra attack speed and 5% PAL attack speed until the battle ends. Again, another interesting one. There's not a lot of sources of attack speed, so getting an extra 5% can be particularly helpful. The only problem being you have to wait 10 seconds before you get here, which could potentially be too late in certain situations. And then we're talking about 17 seconds after the battle started. In my opinion, the usefulness continues to decrease as you're going further and further into the battle, because now you know that a lot of the battle might have already ended by now. You get a 5% extra attack and a 10% extra defense until the battle ends. Helpful, but of course you waited a long time already. And then finally the last one is 22 seconds into the battle. You get a double of the bonuses provided by the first torchbearer, which is basically the critical damage bonuses that we're talking. It becomes 10% instead of 5. So the way I read it is if you have a pretty high critical rate and crit damage, this can be fairly helpful because the first one comes in 2 seconds into battle. Though again, I don't know if I would say that this is one of the best ones out there either, just because the way I read it, it's like pretty selective on what you're getting, right? It's like you have to wait a bunch of time before you get to the attack speed one, and then you have to wait a very, very long time before you get to the attack and defense bonuses. And what I'm thinking is that by that time, it might already be too late, perhaps. But of course, it could depend battle to battle. If you've tried it out and you have a different opinion, or you want to say that you agree with the opinion, feel free to drop it. I don't know how many people actually have this flame and have actually tried it, but if you have, do let me know. Okay, so if we talk about the best artifact, I still think it is the Eye of the Raven. Double clone can be extremely helpful for archers and for warriors. And if you're a mage, casting an equipped skill at random every 20 seconds is a pretty helpful thing because you're all about skills anyway, and that can do a ton of damage. So probably the best artifact for pretty much any class, Eye of Raven, is what I would pick. And then there's some interesting ones out there that do a bunch of basic attack damage, which can be helpful as well. This one, I'd see this being fairly helpful if you're an archer. It gives you global combo, and then it does sort of slice through the enemy's health as you keep doing more basic attacks, and also reduces the ability to heal, which is pretty interesting. The duck is also quite interesting in my opinion. Stacking a bunch of these tiers and then having a consistent damage coming to the enemy and allowing you to do even more damage to them until the end of the battle, in my opinion, puts this up there as well. So those are my opinions on all the artifacts out there. As I mentioned at the start of the video, do write comments if you have a difference of opinion or if you have just other opinions that you want to share, because as you can see, all of them are locked. These are all paid artifacts and I'm not somebody who's been buying all of them and testing them out. But if you are, drop them in the comments and let me know how things are on a more practical basis and help us learn more about which ones you think are best for each class. And let me know if you do agree that the Eye of Raven is pretty much the best artifact out there as of right now, because I think it is for pretty much every class. And if it becomes available, I think that's one that I'd actually want to invest in because it is super cool. And since I still have you here, I do want you to know that you can get between 10 to 35% bonus on in-game purchases in The Legend of Mushroom. The steps are very simple. I have a video where I go through the steps in a lot of detail just so that you are able to just follow the steps step by step and get those amazing bonuses. So until the end of August, our promo code is SkyImmerse2, but starting September, our promo code should be SkyImmerse. Use those promo codes so you're able to get an additional 5% bonus on all of your in-game purchases, in addition to whatever bonus you already have. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked the video, please like it, please subscribe to the channel, comment below so you can actually enhance everyone's learning with your own experiences, and I hope to see you in the next one.